I don't have a lot of Sidney Lumet background. Before doing the network, I had seen The Wiz and I'd seen Serpico.
Yeah.
I think that was it.
We gotta work on that.
Yeah, so getting into Network, which was a real treat for me, something I'd always wanted to see. And the funny thing is, I've owned 12 Angry Men for maybe too many years to have not watched it. I'm an alphabetical guy. Alphabetically, it should have come up early on being a number. So I'm very excited that I finally got the chance. I got up early on Saturday, and I drank some coffee, and I sat with my cat, and I watched 12 old white guys yell at each other. And,
and like I say, when you watch a Sidney Lumet, you're going to get your shouting, you're going to get your quiet, and you're going to get a lot of vicar in your characters. Even this one is the marquee. It's Sidney Lumet's first film.
We're talking 12 Angry Men with two kind of okay temperament guys.
All right, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
And I'm Kyle from GoToFilmReviews.com. Today we're talking 12 Angry Men, as you mentioned before, Sidney Lumet's feature film debut, which is quite something to behold when you really get down to it. Yeah. Not to mention he's working with, these are guys that are they're up there enough in age where you've got to prove yourself. You can't, and they're all I would say almost all 12 guys have had notable careers long after 12 Angry Men.
This was actually a live-action TV show on TV in 1954, starring Bob Cummings from Dial M for Murder, and so a lot of TV. It's very interesting because it's a live TV that everybody thought was lost, never to recover, and somehow in a certain movie studio lot, they found a copy of it in 2003. I think it's available somewhere on YouTube if you want to catch the live action. It's very similar. Joseph Sweeney, he plays the old man in the movie 12 Angry Men, also plays the old man here. I think it's juror number 9.
I think he's number 9, yeah.
Number 9. He plays the same character in the live action TV show version and in the movie.
That's interesting. Yeah, I read that he was kind of involved and moved along, and you almost think I suppose it was only 3 years, so I guess you can still be just as old as you were. But the film follows 12 jurors who basically, it's a bottle episode of any normal TV show. They're all in the jury room, and they're basically deciding whether or not a specific young man is responsible for murder. And they go through
who's a minority.
Yeah, a minority, one who's I guess less wealthy, and basically they're trying to decide if there's enough evidence to convict him.
Convict him that he killed his father, his abusive father. And there's evidence. We learn about the evidence through the exposition investigation as they talk things out.
Yeah.
One of the things that Sidney Lumet did to begin this film is actually did a lot of establishing exterior shots. So you get the building, but then you pan up. So you get this overwhelming, important dereliction duty. And then he goes in the building and he goes up, but then he looks down to see all little people running around the little networkings. And then we navigate to where it's all taking place. So you get this very big, and then we go smaller, and smaller to a point that it almost becomes claustrophobic as the tension builds up.
Well, the way he deals with guiding claustrophobia in a lot of ways. I mean, there's the time crunch. Some characters have places to go. There's the broken fan. There's the heat wave. And then there's also the element of his cinematography and how the film, like you said, the film starts looking down on them and then gets closer to eye level, and then starts to get closer and closer in on the characters as they talk. You do feel that sense of claustrophobia even just watching the film, and you feel a sense of I don't want to be here anymore, even though you're enthralled in it,
Right. And the point is, a lot of the people don't want to be there. It's a job that people aren't interested even to do. They want to get out. They're just have a ball game to go. They got tickets. One of the things I would talk about is cinematographer is Boris Kaufman, who was actually Elia Kazan's cinematographer. Did a lot of black and whites, and he got, I think, Academy Award for On the Waterfront. And here he is. He does starch black and white for this movie too. This movie did a lot of Academy Award nominations, but really didn't win any because the big Technicolor, big explosion, Bridge over River Kwai, it's all the accolades. But I think this is probably the best movie of that year.
It's the one I think that people do love that movie, but I do think this one edges it out a little bit in terms of, it was up for Best Picture, Best Director, Best, what I think is interesting is Best Writing in Adapted Screenplay, when I don't really think there was many changes from the original, screenplay that was written.
And the guy that
You know,
wrote the
same
screenplay,
person wrote it.
yeah.
So I don't really know if it's that well adapted, because it's just the same thing, really. By that rationale, you could maybe nominate the 2006 Omen film, because it uses the exact same script as the 76 one. But anyway, you mentioned Kaufman, and I think like I got really big into Jean Vigo last year. He was a kind of nonconformist director and made only, I think, like 4 films. Most of them were short films, and then La Adelante, which was a feature, and then didn't make any more movies. Boris Kaufman did every single one of those films as a cinematographer.
Wow. So, you know, and that's one of the things, this Sidney Lumet's first film, and then he hires Boris Kaufman to do this very stars black and white. And he does also like Conrad Hall using the weather outside to kind of bleed into, and Conrad Hall did that in Cold Blood, of the weather outside and the rain coming onto the people. This is actually, what interesting about the writing is they actually have like what I call a barometer character. Sometimes your barometer character is the lead, like Indiana Jones. When he's scared, you're scared. When you're happy, he's happy. But here, I think a barometer character is Lee J. Cobb,
Yeah, it's the most unusual one.
Most unusual one, because he's somebody you don't really root for, but when he's calm, everybody else is calm. When he's amped up, you're amped up. But when he changes his mind, it seems like everybody else changes their mind too.
See, and I think the great thing about it is each one of these films, or each one of these characters in the film, could almost be an archetype, because it's when do you get swayed by the argument. And looking at Henry Fonda leading the film, I'm going to say this, it's not meant as an offense to Henry Fonda. I think he has the easiest performance in the film to do well, because he doesn't have to change his mind. No. So many of these other people have to ethically showcase that there is doubt in their mind, and as the film comes to each one of them and showcases that maybe they change it, maybe they don't, or maybe it's a hung jury. And I think that's the most difficult thing, is to have the discussion where you're not set in stone. Even he doesn't really know if the kid's guilty or not, but he just knows in his heart that he has the reasonable doubt to let him go. Yeah,
let's talk about this before we send somebody. And everybody's like, why do we have to talk about it? The evidence is here. And then they try to talk in the explanation of the logistics of the evidence that wasn't really presented in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. I actually rewatched it. I love the judge, who just seems like he's just going through the motions, doesn't really give a crap. Mm-hmm. Just go in there and get out of my sight now. It's almost like everybody's relaxed except for Henry Fonda.
Yeah, they all have a job to do, and the only person,
just going through the motions, everybody,
and the boy, which we see, him for just a moment as he's like awaiting this judgment, and he's scared, he's terrified, which doesn't give his guilt or not guilt, but you feel for like, okay, we have to get this right.
Yeah.
When they go into the moment, and I think what's great is that, again, like I said, with each of these characters being an archetype, each of them has a different thing that they're putting as more important than this young man's life. The one, Jack Warden wants to get to his baseball game. Lee J. Cobb has prejudices from his past about how kids should be acting, and how he's already been set up to be a failure. Ed Begley has maybe some inner racism,
Oh yeah. He's the last one to change his mind. So a lot of them are bringing their personal experiences into the case to make a judgment, or not based on the evidence presented.
Yeah.
And so like Lee J. Cobb, when I was younger, I used to call my dad sir. They don't do that anymore. These kids today, in which every generation always says the younger generation doesn't get it, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah. But then you get like like how their lives outside have affected what they're going to do in this courtroom. E.G. Marshall being a numbers man, I think he's a broker or works Wall Street.
He's from Marshall. He's from your favorite movie, Christmas Vacation.
But he's very much about like the numbers and the details and the facts, and everything is cut and dry. It either is a moneymaker or not a moneymaker. And he's in here, and he's kind of the guy. He's the exposition machine, and he makes it look easy because he's giving a lot of detail in this movie because he's a facts guy. Yeah. And then you look over at juror number 12, I forget the actor playing him, but juror number 12 is an advertising guy. And his whole job is to sway people's minds. And it's ironic that he is swayed back and forth.
And he's distracted, like he's making notes.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the case.
He's kind of like not really in it at all. And they sway him back and forth and back and forth. And it's just interesting to watch because I don't know which one I'm like the siding character for, but it really makes you think about, could I make the choice to send a young man to die in 10 minutes? I don't think so.
No. One of the things that has a literary prop is the most famous one is the bringing of the knife, which is staged very well in this movie.
Great scene.
It's a great scene. And the funny thing is after you see it, you're like, how long did Harry Fonda was going to hold on to that? before you're going to make a call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he knew exactly when to make the call, right?
Well, what I like too is he has this setup. There is the setup of the scene, and it doesn't occur too late in the film to make you think that it's a plot device. No. It happens just early enough where you're like, he's trying to guide us to why he's unconvinced. Yeah. And I like that each one of these potential arguments that they look at on the surface seems 100% this kid did it. And then they each take a moment to analyze the different arguments that are there. And we're not, again, I'm not going to tell you whether or not they come to the decision or not, but what's great is watching them go slowly through each one bit of evidence. And that's kind of the frustrating part, is it's not about the jury's ability to make a case. It's about the jury's ability to read the case put on in the court. They have no control over the amount of evidence. They could ask for more evidence. They don't have more evidence. This is what they have.
And rather than put your personal experiences aside, and your prejudice, and then rather than what is presented in the case only.
Yeah, it's such an intriguing, and on the surface, this movie sounds boring. And that's what's so great about it, is that you can't get away usually with 12 guys just chatting at each other in a room for 90 minutes.
No, and I believe a lot of them talked about how they actually were treated like jurors. They got a weekly pay. They weren't supposed to talk to anybody else. It's like, it almost was like we were jurors, that we had our lines and we change whatever we say now. Don't go, stay in your lane, right? Yep. So there was a lot of that, and Sidney emphasized of treating almost like jurors too. Like, request, can we have a break? No.
Well, and even the way the film is shot too, because they had, being in a box, which is what they are, you had to light it specifically, you had to shoot it specifically in a certain way from certain angles, just exactly right. So they had to actually pretty much shoot all the scenes from this corner, and then go to this corner and shoot. And it's almost like they were just doing the teleplay, and they were just putting on a play. I think I read somewhere there was like 365 consecutive takes basically that they performed, which I read as, did they perform the whole thing 365 times? I don't know, but a lot of times.
It looks like they just used one camera too sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't even know they did a lot of two cameras.
Yeah, but the way they utilize the cinematography just in there too, I mean, that camera is moving and grooving, and it doesn't trip over people or over, it's a tight room, and they keep that camera rollicking, quite a bit.
Close to close. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the most famous scenes is Lee J. Cobb reenacting the scene with Henry Fonda, and everybody's, "Are you actually going to do it?" Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it does play. I mean, everybody, we all know he's not, but it's still like.
Yeah, you get the sense that. Even though Cobb is really our antagonist, in that he is the toughest person to convince. Yeah. He's not a bad person. We just each come into the case with our own things.
We talk about it with writing. Antagonist doesn't mean you're always.
Just means you're opposite of the protagonist.
Opposite, right? Sometimes the antagonist just needs to be the one, different from the equation, right? Mm-hmm. He's the opposite of the equation. So yeah. So he's not always just primarily evil, but he's also why we have to do this.
Yeah. I think the unsung hero of the film is actually Martin Balsam, who plays juror number 1. The head juror, if you will. Because just like E.G. Marshall, he has to basically direct the film.
Yeah,
he's directing the actors in terms of we have to make sure everybody's kind of staying on task as a performer, and he has to do a lot of the things like, will you sit down? Will you do this? Let's get this done. He's the guy who's directing the actors within the film, and he could be boring. He could be. Yeah. You could hate this character because every time he comes in, you're like, I get it. They have to move. But he plays it really well. It's one of the reasons why he's an unsung hero in Psycho as well.
No, he's the detective in Psycho. Mm-hmm. He's very famous in that one. But he could have done it very loud, and he doesn't do it very loud. Yeah. But yeah, he's the kind of the referee from protagonist to antagonist. He's the equation. He's the balance. He's the bridge. Mm-hmm. Where all right, let's get together. He tries to be polite. He's not trying to be overly aggressive with. But we have a job to do, guys. Let's do it. Let's get it over with. Would you do it now? Would you probably have a female in there?
Oh, you absolutely have to. And I think you have to change the race of a character or two. Yeah. What's interesting about 12 Angry Men is that there's this film, and you mentioned the 1954 teleplay, and then there was, I think William Friedkin did a 97 version of the film
Made for
television movie.
Yeah.
But that's not the only stuff. If you look online, there are like dozens of films that are just minorly influenced by 12 Angry Men. You know, there's a ton of films in different countries, in different languages that have like taken, it's not the same script, but they've taken the idea and they've worked with it. And it's, you know, it's kind of like the television show The Office, where like where you put it means a lot and when you put it means a lot. Yeah. And I think, yeah, like right now you've got to be able to come at it with, you know, different angles, because you don't just have 12 white guys talking to each other.
Which is kind of now it kind of is stuck into the late 50s. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, if you want to redo it, you're going to have to mix it up a little bit.
But see, I think this film, what's great about it is, even though it is, you know, old time in terms of like its representation of its jury, the film is so incredibly timely right now. We are living in a time right now where people tend to view each other as guilty until proven innocent, and not the other way around, which is what our entire law system is based on. We have a lot of animosity towards each other, and that is incredibly frustrating to watch on the outside. And watching it in this film, these guys have a job to do, and their job will decide the person's life. Yeah. And they each aren't even really taking that into consideration until Fonda pushes that narrative.
So like I'm trying to bring up, even though it seems very timely, it seems very stuck in the 50s, what it's talking about is far more relevant today than it probably was even a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, when the film came out, it's an interesting experiment, even just on its own, because, you know, you can put this on a stage, but like adapting a staged idea of like one room to a film usually requires a little bit more. I was critical of Fences when it came out. I still think the movie's great, but when Fences came out, I was critical because it felt like a play that they just shot and put in a movie. You know, whereas I think if you're going to make something into a film, you've got to filmatize it a little bit. And I think there's a better job of that in the more recent Viola Davis film, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, where it was a play that was changed into a film that feels more of a cinematic experience. This is interesting because it's not really changed. It's pretty much just a play set to film, but it works.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's not the cinematography is fantastic, but what they want to cleverly do is make it slowly shrink into you.
Yeah, and it may be because of that cinematography, because the camera is not always on the outside. Yeah. That sometimes that camera gets right up in there, and it's done in a way where if you were watching this thing performed on a stage in front of you, you don't get those driving in claustrophobic moments. You don't get the passion moments where they really like focus on a character. I really like that the Juror number 8, that moment where he's like, when he's the first person to sway his vote, and they think it's the other guy, and he's like, no, it was me. And there's that like right up in his face look, and you really get a sense of it, you know?
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff that's stuck in the 50s. It's very timely, but there's a lot of modern things to this. A title card is very overly modern. The establishing shots is very overly. You would do that probably in a movie if you're doing a close environment. You're like, where are we going? Why are we here? And then you close it in. So there's a lot of technical things that are very modern to this film. There's a lot of dialogue that's very modern, even though it's kind of stuck in the 50s.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a thing that kind of turns off people. I don't like the title. I think the title should be like 12 Jurors or something like that, or something simpler. But when you have 12 Angry Men, it sounds like we're just going to have a shouting match.
See, and I think there was a time period in my life, I was very young at the time, but like, and I didn't know that this movie was about a bunch of jurors talking about it, but the title intrigued me more than I think if you had been more like, you know, descriptive with it. Who are these angry men? What are they yelling at? Like, my childhood was like really pent up with this question, but we didn't have a copy of the movie. I like the idea of the
But
title.
I think it's funny that I had a civics class when I was in junior high, and like after civics, we're gonna watch this movie.
Oh yeah. On the surface, like this sounds like a movie that, you know, again, could be incredibly boring, and even when you know the plot, could be incredibly boring. What I really enjoy about it though is that, you know, there's that even that long take sensibility, because you said like that wasn't something that was done a ton back in the 50s, was long takes. When you watch that opening credits as they play out and as they filter into the room, and then our camera moves down and follows all of these individual characters, by the time that shot is done, you kind of know who all 12 of these guys are, you know, on the surface at least. It's a unique way to open a film and get you acquainted, you know, because I think that's the problem is if you don't know the names of the characters, it could be really tough to actually care about any of them because you might.
And
have
you do
trouble,
actually care
you know.
about it. Even the antagonist, you get to care about him.
Mhm.
I like when he takes out his wallet. Kids ruin your life, and I ever talk to my kids.
Yeah,
and
but you know all 12 of these guys by the end of the movie to varying degrees, but you do know each of them pretty well.
Yeah.
What's interesting is the staging too. I like that they stage them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Because then, even though you don't know the characters, you know from where they were sitting probably which juror they were, even if you miscount. You know, like you get a sense of who they are placed in the scene as well.
So it's a strong recommendation. If you like Sidney Lumet, I think it's an important, not only a strong recommendation, I think it's an important film to see.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to toss around the term perfect, but I tend to like give films like a 5 out of 5 if I can't find a flaw. And this is a movie I cannot find a flaw with. No. Like I watched it all the way through and I was so intrigued by it. I was like, I can't wait to see this again. And that's a great moniker for a film to have. I had that with Zodiac when we watched it last year.
Yeah.
I can't wait to watch this again. And in fact, that film I did watch 4 days later. I made my wife watch it with me. So maybe this will be different. But yeah, I do think it's if it's not perfect, it's nearly perfect. A masterpiece in filmmaking, which makes you just angry because you're like, this guy's first film was this good. This is insane.
Right.
It shouldn't be this.
We go, and I think it's funny that we got to this movie after we did like De Palma movies, where there are just scopes and long takes of action. And here's a movie that just sets up a room, and here we go, say your lines.
Yeah. And that's what I think is most amazing about it. So we both, both very clearly will recommend this movie to you. I'm so happy I got a chance to watch it. This is the highest rated black and white movie on IMDb.
Really?
The highest rated. It's the 5th highest rated total, behind The Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather 1 and 2, and I think The Dark Knight, because again it's a very fan-based thing, but I think this film is definitely worthy of its high placement on the high ratings list.
And if I was an Academy Award-winning judge, I would have voted Best Picture over Bridge over River Kwai, even though I like Technicolor.
Yeah, given the time period, I think I'd have to go with this movie, but
it's just black and white. Everybody wants color. 57, we're kind of over it, yeah.
Yeah. But we both enjoyed the film. We want to know, what do you think about it? We're talking the 1957 Sidney Lumet film, 12 Angry Men. Let us know in the comment section down below what you thought of the film. If you haven't had a chance to see it, now's the time. Because as we said, it's pretty timely for a black and white film. And if you've never seen a black and white film, it's a pretty good place to start, too.
It's a heck of a movie to see during the matinee, as you can see during the day.
Oh, yeah.
Great movie for a matinee.
So definitely let us know your comments down below. Hey, have you checked out the Patreon? I bet you haven't yet, but now's the time to do it. Patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. We got the link down in the description. You can check out how you can help pick some of the different films that we've talked about with the rest of the season here. Because like I said earlier, we've talked some wild movies in season 3, and I want to keep the wild train going on and really jump around a lot and see some unique voices that we don't get a chance to see.
Right.
So definitely consider looking up that Patreon. You can also like and subscribe to make sure that you get all of our content every time it shows up. That way you don't have to go looking for it, you know? So, once again, guys, I'm Kyle Goethe. You can find my film reviews on GoFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. We'll catch you next time.